So just answered a couple emails, and then there's another one that got asked several days ago that I've just kind of been avoiding. And I thought, well, what the heck? We're doing videos, so I'll talk about these things. So one of the questions, somebody wanted me to do a video about night latches, how they work, why they work, blah, 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 blah. And I guess first thing I ought to do is explain what a night latch is. A night latch is you take a piece of rope or a dog collar, or the handful of times I've ever really dealt with them at all, I always use a silk scarf, and I'll explain why that. But you can take just about anything and you tie it around your swells. And the idea is if your horse goes to bucking, you can grab hold of it and you've got something to hang on to help you ride a bucking horse. So there's that. I've never been a super big fan of the night latch. It's not something I use. I've tried it a couple of times. I had a saddle that I put one on a whole bunch of times, but I never liked getting a hold of it. I never really liked it. There's a couple of reasons why. So with a night latch, the idea is, obviously, if you think your horse is going to blow up and buck, he's probably going to do it right off the bat. So you cheek your horse up, you get your foot in the stirrup, you reach over the horse's back, get a hold of your night latch, and then you step aboard so you've already got a hold of it. Well, I never liked that very good because I'm not even on the horse yet and I'm kind of tied to him with my hand through that rope or whatever is tied around my swells. That always kind of scared me. And I never felt like I could get my hand in there fast enough if I didn't start out that way. So I never really liked night latches. The other thing I don't like about them is they're tied directly to your swells, and so you've got your hand in there and your knuckles are right against your swell. And so every jump, you're banging your knuckles against your swell. That's just like banging your knuckles against anything else. It hurts. And eventually, your brain will say, let go, that hurts. And I don't like the idea of that either. So I'm not really all about night latches. And then I said that the couple of times I've really dealt with it is when I was learning to ride saddle bronc horses. I'd tie a silk scarf around the swells of my bronc saddle, and pardon me. And the idea was if I kind of got in a storm, I could grab down, get reset on my practice horse, and try to get back in time. And that was all well and good, and I did it. But the reason I used a silk scarf is that if I did get bucked off and I hung a spur or anything in it, that silk would rip. Silk's really, really strong, but it would rip. And it was Joe Marvel's idea. I don't know if that's how he learned or that's how he taught Sam and all them other really good bronc riders, but it's what he made me do. Maybe he thought I was going to die more than other people were. But that's what I liked about that, is that if I did get kind of tangled up in it, that night latch would break or rip. But if you use a piece of rope or a nylon dog collar or something like that, you're hung to it. If you get hung to it, you're hung to it. And I talk about in one of the videos I did way back, the ways not to die. I talk about how you put your rope strap on. And I don't do it the way I tell everybody else to do it. Yeah, it's the same deal. If you hang your foot or hang anything up in your rope the way I do it, it's not going to break and you're not going to die, or you're not going to live through it, or maybe you're going to hope you didn't live through it. But with that night latch, I don't know, it just always seemed a lot scarier to me. So I don't really like night latches. I like to I tie my rope on hard and fast. I like to grab a hold of my rope. I feel like I can lift on it, kind of like a bareback rigging, and get a lot more done. Just suits my style better. What I do know about night latches, because I've been around a lot of night latch guys, is it needs to be tight, to where you can just barely get your hand in there between your night latch and and your swells. Guys that ride night latches that have a bigger gap in there where there's some give to it back and forth, those guys get bucked off, and it completely defeats the purpose of having a night latch. If you're going to use one, have it where it's tight to get your hand in, and it helps you out, and then you can rear back on your swells the same way I rear back on my rope. So that's what I have to say about night latches. The next thing is, it was the same email, the same person asked me about hobbling my stirrups. This is something I don't really want to talk about, but I'm gonna. Don't hobble your stirrups. I hobble my stirrups on these younger horses. I've got several reasons for it. One, I feel like when I start out riding these colts, if my legs are squeezed against them really tight, then later on in life, anytime we get in a storm, I can squeeze my legs against them really tight and they'll feel real secure. Maybe that's just in my head. I don't know. But that's part of my process. I do a lot of my steering in the first few rides with my legs because I've got leverage in my legs when my stirrups are hobbled together. I can get leverage out of my legs to steer those young horses around. I feel that's a good deal. The whole idea, hobbling your stirrups is an old school northern bronc rider trick to get around when you can't ride. And I promise you can. You hobble your stirrups, you can get around one that you couldn't ride under other circumstances. You will feel like someone put you in a Maytag dishwasher and pushed you down a hill if you have a horse blow up and buck with you and your hobbles or your stirrups are hobbled. It's not a good feeling. It's not fun. It's real icky feeling. I really don't suggest anybody else does it. As far as the danger part of it, it looks dangerous. It's not necessarily any more dangerous. You're not more likely to hang a foot if you get bucked off. You're probably less likely to hang a foot if you get bucked off. You're obviously way less likely to get bucked off. But if you keep them on there for very long, like if you're just doing it for a security feeling, if you keep them on there for very long, you create a whole bunch of bad habits where you don't use your body correctly to ride your horse because you can't, because you don't have freedom in the way that your feet move and your legs move. I just really don't, it's not something that I would suggest everybody do or necessarily anybody does. It's something I do. Again, like the how to not die videos, do as I say, not as I do. If you want to do it, go for it. I will say if you do it, if you hobble those stirrups, the tighter the better. You don't want much play in there. You want them as close to that horse's body as you can get them. And it's dang sure a little hard to find your right stirrup the first few times you do it. So I guess that's what I have to say about hobbling your stirrups. I really don't condone it, even though I do it. The last thing I wanted to talk about was somebody asked me about a running W. They're all the same. Yeah, the producer was asking me if this is a different video or if they're all the same. Let's just run them all together. I don't care. Do it however you want. The last thing I was going to talk about was running W. I was asked about a running W. How do you do it? Can you do a video on it? Blah, blah, blah. No, I won't do a video on it because I don't do it and I don't think it's something that needs done. And I'm not going to teach the whole wide world how to do it. I know how to do it, but I don't think that's something that needs to be out there in the big wide world. I will talk about it and I will explain why I don't do it, why I don't think it's any good. A running W, you put a cuff around the left front foot at the pastern. First of all, you saddle your horse with a big steel ring saddled, cinched into your cinch, you just put a ring on there and cinch it up. Put a cuff on the left front, put a cuff on the right front. You run a rope from left front to the ring, to the right front, and through a ring in the cuff, obviously. I think that's obvious, but I guess not, so I had to say it. And then back through the ring and back to you. Then you've got a helper on the ground. And then when you step on that horse, when that horse blows up and bucks, the helper goes to the hip when their front feet are off the ground, takes their front feet out from under them, you spill them right on their nose. It pretty much works every single time. They'll never buck again. But you didn't really fix them. You didn't do anything. All you did was make them not want to buck. Okay, well, so now when something goes wrong, they're going to do something that's way more dangerous. They're going to run off. They're going to flip over. God only knows what they're going to do. Bucking was kind of the best option. If you didn't do all your work right and you had them to where you still wanted to buck, to where they still wanted to buck, bucking was the best thing that could have happened. And you getting bucked off was the best thing that could have happened. If that horse runs off, hits the fence and crashes and burns, and like, that's way worse. That is way, and flipping over is way, way, way worse. You're not fast enough to get away. So a running W, yeah, it works. Works every time. Like I've only done it a handful of times when I was a kid. Somebody else had me do it and I was test dummy. It was infallible. It worked. But those were the things, and you'll hardly ever hear me talk about Ray Hunt. But one of the things Ray Hunt was always preaching to everybody is that, hey, there's a better way. There's a better way to do things than the way it's been done for 100 years on the Montana plains. Running W's was one of the ways that was done, and there's a better way. A better way is doing your groundwork, doing things right, getting help, yada, 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 yada. There's a thousand better ways to do things. If it's just a matter of the horse bucking, like, gosh, do some more stuff. Do some groundwork. Do a whole bunch of things. And just getting to where he doesn't want to buck anymore. Running W's aren't my cup of tea. They're a wreck waiting to happen. And they can make a little wreck into a big wreck. Yeah, they work. They work great. But I don't like them. I don't use them. And so I've been avoiding even talking about them. But that's what they are, and that's why I'm not all about them. Lay your horse down, flag him more, do this, do that, flank him, do 500 other things. But you don't need to screw around with a running W. Since the time when I was a kid and an older guy he did it, he was on the ground and I was the test dummy. That's the only time it's never been part of my program. Nowadays, if somebody brought me a horse that was a candidate for running W, I would send the horse home. I'm not going to ride that son of a gun. And honest to God, that's like an 8-year-old half thoroughbred, half Mustang is what is a candidate. What's that? That's already been fouled. Yeah, somebody else already started at him and wrecked him up. That's a candidate for a running W, and nobody needs to ride those. You don't need to ride those. I'm not gonna ride those. So I've got no use for the running W. It's a cool trick, cool little piece of history, and thankfully it's something that has pretty much gone away with the wind, and hopefully it'll stay there because it's not something that anybody needs to do. That's what I feel about running W's. If Grandpa swore by them and I just made you mad, whoops.